West Texas town of El Paso, I fell in love with a Mexican girl.
Few songs can last half a century. Marty Robbins' El Paso will last many more than that. An ode to El Paso and all things country western cowboy, it's a song that was immortal from the start. El Paso tells the story of a doomed love for the lovely Felina in El Paso. While in no way a true story, Marty Robbins' songwriting and talent made it, and still does, real for the listener. It reflected the foundational culture and experience of Marty Robbins as a musician. The Mexican-American borderland, Arizona cowboys, heartbreak songs, and a very productive car ride. There is some reality, some fantasy, and a lot of musical mystery in it. El Paso still fascinates listeners to this day. El Paso founded the culture of a cowboy hit for Marty Robbins and country western music in general. The song would become a cornerstone of the legendary album Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs, Marty Robbins' career, and the lore of modern Southwestern American music. El Paso created the informal El Paso Saga, which spanned Marty Robbins' career from essentially beginning to end. Like El Paso City itself, it was a passage between the two worlds of Marty Robbins' discography. So what's in El Paso then? And why do so many still fall in love with the lovely Felina? The predominance of what Marty called cowboy music often obscures his early career to listeners who are not alive to see it develop. Marty's early hits were largely pop songs targeted at teeny boppers, though not to say they lacked the ability of his later career. Songs like Singin' the Blues, The Story of My Life, and A White Sport Coat and Pink Carnation scored Marty his earliest breakout hits. His major success was with these heartbreak songs like A White Sport Coat and A Pink Carnation. Popular in the 1950s, they were based on lost or spurned love. The sad endings of these ballads of lost love were the earlier roots of El Paso. Marty's talent to always jerk a tear from someone's eye earned him the nickname Mr. Teardrop until he developed his own cowboy persona later on in his career. The shift to the gunslinger or wanderer Marty Robbins came in 1958 with Marty's shift to Western music by way of The Hanging Tree. Written for the 1959 Gary Cooper film, The Hanging Tree, Marty's song would become the prototype for the later, legendary, Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs album. The change in musical styling came because Marty was bored of pop and rockabilly, though his music retained vague traces of both. Marty admitted love ballads were always his favorite though, but he also thought, approaching 30, it was too weird to continue the teen heartthrob gimmick. The Hanging Tree inspired a desire for a new genre in Marty. A native son of the Arizona deserts, Marty Robbins wanted music that reflected his beloved Arizona, Southwestern hills, and the cowboy stories of his impoverished youth. No doubt the fact Marty's maternal ancestors were actually cowboys, freighters, and one lone poet helped inspire him. He already had a catalog of cowboy songs ready to record. Inspired, El Paso was the type of song he wanted, but how he got to it is somewhat debated. Marty had the idea for El Paso in his head for a while. In 1955, he drove through El Paso, and, inspired by the El Paso city limits sign, he wanted to write a romantic song about it. Eureka! He then forgot about it. In 1956, it happened again. Marty saw the El Paso city limits sign while on the road, and wanted to get to work on that song the second he stopped. He then immediately proceeded to forget about it again. The third time was the charm though in 1957. The song kept coming to Marty. The first line, "Out in the West Texas town of El Paso, I fell in love with a Mexican girl." He was finally able to get to it in 1957 because his wife Marizona was driving while Marty was in the back seat. They were on their way back to Phoenix, Arizona, by way of the Carlsbad Highway into El Paso Juarez in a turquoise Cadillac. On the way, the family stopped at a bar to ask for directions. It was closed, but Marty asked the locals where they were. The ones milling around outside the bar said they were surrounded by the Badlands of New Mexico. It hit Marty. The fact the bar they stopped at may or may not have actually been Rosa's Cantina may or may not have been another inspiration. After that, as his son Marty Robbins remembers, Marty went to work on the long-awaited song. Once they reached Phoenix, Marty sat down with a legal pad and wrote the entire song in one sitting. He later described the writing process as like watching a movie, and said it took as much time to write as it did to sing, meaning around 4 minutes. Marty said he had no idea where it would end when he began it. He was surprised by the ending and said it never felt like he wrote it. As he reflected on the emotional minutes, the song, just came out. It would be worth 1,000,000 times the few minutes it actually took to write. After 1959, Marty could never conclude a performance without it. Though, at the time of recording, Columbia doubted the marketability of the cowboy western music, especially with Marty Robbins' established pop image and smooth voice. Columbia's executives associated anything with a sniff of country music with southern twang or Appalachian drawl. They gave Marty and his Nashville backup a single day to record the entire western album, fully believing it would be a failure. The group pulled it off in one legendary 8-hour session on April 7th, 1959, a session fueled by Marty Robbins' jokes. The session featured members of the legendary Nashville A-Team, Grady Martin on lead guitar, Bob Moore on bass, then Jack Pruitt on rhythm guitar, and Louis Dunn on drums. The entire ensemble was backed by Marty's regular musical companions, and often co-writers, the Glazier Brothers, along with, of course, Marty Robbins on guitar and main vocals. The Glazier Brothers recalled El Paso was probably finished on around the 6th complete take. It was a solid performance all around, because El Paso would top both the country and pop music charts in January 1960. Gunfighter ballads and trail songs has essentially never been out of print since. Marty later admitted about the whole album, "I had no idea there would be a big market for it." El Paso always remained Marty's favorite song. When asked how many times he sang it, Marty replied, "Tell me how many personal appearances I've made since 1959, and then I will know." El Paso, as a song, can tell you more about Marty Robbins than any of his statements can. El Paso's sound ultimately derives from the ranchera, or ranch ballads of northern Mexico. Another example of the border's intermixing culture in Marty's style, a confluence of Spanish-Mexican sound with the Anglo-American Western. With his Nashville backing, though, El Paso took on a vague 1950s pop flair, a carryover from Marty's early career. His smooth pop voice could carry a song with ease. That is where Marty Robbins' personality stood out in the song. His songwriting excelled in the 3-act dramatic Western ballad structure based on traditions of earlier campfire cowboy tales. While influenced by earlier legends of doomed love, El Paso is purely its own. Out in the West Texas town of El Paso, it tells the story of the singer, a cowboy, who kills for the love of the Mexican dancer Felina at Rosa's Cantina, who entrances him. It's a classic dramatic Western in that regard. The singer, though, regrets his murder of another cowboy over Felina, who inflamed his jealousy. Shocked by the foul, evil deed he had done, the singer steals a horse and escapes into the Badlands of New Mexico beyond El Paso. His desire for Felina, though, drives him back to the hill overlooking El Paso. There he knows he will face death. Upon his return, the singer is hunted down by a dozen riders, shot, falls from his saddle, but is able to meet Felina. Killed by a bullet to the chest, the singer kisses Felina, then dies in her arms. Killed, basically, by his desire to return to her. It is not complicated, but a good song does not need to be. El Paso carries most of its weight in its sound and simplicity of story. For a 4-minute song, it includes a cohesive story of romance, dashing, escapes, and gunfights, which is pretty good even for today. The ultimate lesson of El Paso is love, or lust, can build up as much as it can destroy. One of Marty's favorite topics to sing about, either in terms of romantic, family, or love of nature. He would later attempt to remedy Wicked Felina's role in the song's 1966 sequel, Felina from El Paso, which gave Felina a backstory in impoverished Mexico and makes her more than a temptress that destroys those she entrances. It was simply Marty expanding upon the whole cowboy romance, romanticism, and mythos of the song. At the time, Columbia thought the 4-minute epic of El Paso was too long. Marty refused to cut it down and said 4 minutes was the most compact it could get. Columbia believed a song beyond 2.5 minutes would get no airtime on the radio. Marty retorted on the drafting process of El Paso, "I worked it over again and again. I worked on that song for 3 years, off and on, but instead of making it shorter, it got longer. I couldn't tell the story in less than 4 minutes and 37 seconds. El Paso was rather radical in its length and storytelling complexity for radio music at the time. It would be one of the first epic songs to pave the way for longer music on the air, so an agreement was reached by both sides. 2 versions of El Paso would be issued on the single. a 2-minute 58 A-side, and 4-minute 38-second B-side. Every radio station ended up playing the longer B-side, which featured the full song. Nobody particularly liked the choppy A-side Columbia issued. Marty notoriously despised the edited A-side, which ruined the song, and was happy when the 2-minute version slipped into obscurity. It's pretty hard to find nowadays, and nobody really wants to seek it out. Though, some versions do remove a verse to make the song 4 minutes and 19 seconds. The world, it seems, would hear all of El Paso. Marty described the basic philosophy behind El Paso as more like a folk song of the early American West. To me, there's quite a big difference in cowboy and country and western. El Paso's appeal rested on its slightly mariachi style and the Mexican border sound, the part of the song Marty liked best. He never got tired of performing it. It reflected the American Southwest and how much of his imagination was owed to cowboys like his grandfather. There was no lack of influence from that culture which surrounded Marty Robbins' childhood. His grandfather, Texas Bob Heckle, was rather open about the brashness of his cowboy personality. In his poetry, Bob Heckle wrote about his acquisition of a horse to leave Texas, and wrote on the mythology of the cowboy in his poem, The Cowboy Past and Present, "A trusty colt's persuader you will find upon his hip, just to avenge an insult if, perchance, you let one slip." The slip of a revolver matching the slip of the tongue shows up in far more of Marty's songs than just El Paso. There's a great deal of mystery behind El Paso. Like, was Rosa's Cantina a real place? And it is Rosa's Cantina, not Rose's. The name is often misheard because Marty's voice often goes light on the last letter in the song. Part of the reason for the name was due to Marty's habit of mixing English-American first names and Spanish-Mexican last names. See his other songs which exemplify the habit, like Billy Venero, Jimmy Martinez, and Johnny Fadavo, etc. But was there an actual Rosa's Cantina? There is. It is in the city of El Paso, and could very well be the Rosa's Cantina. It's hard to say, though. The real Rosa's Cantina, which you can eat at, is on Donovan Street in El Paso. It sits right on the edge of Texas, New Mexico, and Chihuahua, and the heart of the Mexican-American borderland, essentially. The bar or restaurant is likely no more than 100 years old, though. It was originally a bar named Los Tigres prior to 1957. The lands around it, on both sides of the Rio Grande, were once a hotspot for Mexican bootleggers during Prohibition, who used to smuggle alcohol over the border by way of the river. Events which inspired their own song, El Contrabando del El Paso. In 1957, Roberto Zubia and his wife Anita bought Los Tigres and renamed it Rosa's Cantina. Why Rosa's? Roberto named it after a friend's sister because Rosa rhymes with cantina. The Zubias owned Rosa's for more than 50 years until their relatives Oscar and Patricia Lopez bought it from them. The Lopezes own it today. Rosa's could have been the bar Marty stopped at in El Paso that was closed. The dates seem to fit together. But when later told there was an actual Rosa's Cantina in El Paso, Marty admitted he had no idea it existed. So, if it was the bar he stopped at, Marty did not notice the name, or only did so subconsciously. He often said Rosa's Cantina, from the song, was not based on any exact bar in El Paso or Juarez. Marty named the restaurant he later owned Rosa's Cantina, but the actual Rosa's in El Paso became the unofficial official Rosa's Cantina. The song simply tracks too well to the bar and the badlands that surround it. One could really escape Rosa's Cantina by way of the back door to the mountains of New Mexico. Mount Cristo Rey, within the distance of the bar, really does overlook El Paso and could be the hill overlooking El Paso. There are no ghosts of cowboys here, though. Maybe. El Paso does not truly end with the lovelorn singer cowboy's death. Marty penned no end of sequels to El Paso, some fully realized and some not, all giving rise to the informal El Paso Saga. San Angelo was more a thematic sequel to El Paso than a literal sequel. Marty at least wrote it to play off the model of El Paso. It runs 5 minutes 32 seconds with a similar plot and complexity of El Paso, but in reverse. It features a cowboy, once again doomed in love, who returns to San Angelo to reclaim his lover Socorro. Socorro even has dark eyes that sparkle like diamonds, akin to Felina's. The cowboy's love, though, puts him in danger. Upon returning to the city at 10 o'clock in the morning, the cowboy is ambushed by his enemies who fire upon him. His love will not allow the cowboy to run or escape, though. In a subversion of El Paso, it is Socorro who is shot down by a ranger, who the cowboy then shoots down in revenge. The others fire upon the cowboy, and, in his last moments, he grabs Socorro's hand to die with her. Well, never remembered on the same magnitude as El Paso, San Angelo, in a bit of El Paso, would provide part of the plot for Marty Robbins' movie Ballad of a Gunfighter, 1964. Funnily enough, Marty does not even sing in that movie. El Paso's first literal sequel, or more redux, came in 1966 with Felina from El Paso. It also confirmed Felina's name is spelled F-A-L-E-E-N-A. Some people are confused about that sometimes. On the origins of the name, Marty remembered it belonged to a classmate from elementary school. The song is a reinterpretation of El Paso from Felina's perspective, but it abandons El Paso's first-person storytelling in favor of third-person narration. In the song, it makes Felina more sympathetic, as described in her backstory, of escaping a life of poverty in Mexico for the glamour of El Paso, where the rich and bold wine and dine her. She does truly fall in love with the ill-fated cowboy. As, expanding upon El Paso's ending, after the cowboy is shot down, Felina commits suicide with his revolver, unable to live without him, a Romeo and Juliet-esque conclusion. Then 1970s El Paso City returned to the first-person storytelling of El Paso. The singer, flying over El Paso in an airplane, wonders if he is a reincarnation of the dead cowboy from the song El Paso, as he can feel the pull of the city and knows the exact path the cowboy took in El Paso, wondering to himself, I get the feeling sometime in another world I lived in El Paso. Unable to understand the mystery of it all, he feels, if he returns, he will meet the same fate as the cowboy from El Paso. The song El Paso City reflected Marty Robbins' own relationship with the technology developing the American Southwest. He wrote El Paso City under circumstances similar to his drafting of El Paso, only more than a decade later, and this time in an airplane. Like El Paso, he had the idea for years beforehand but couldn't get anything going. The idea finally bloomed when he was on a passenger plane, and the pilot directed the passengers to look at El Paso below, which they were passing over. After that, Marty started writing and had the entire song finished by the time the flight touched down in Los Angeles. Like Marty's earlier tunes, Man Walks Among Us, and his series of race car songs, it reflected a technologically developing Southwest and a changing American imagination. The image of the cowboy no longer seemed as omnipresent in Arizona as it once had. Marty had lived his early life walking through the desert, his career driving through it, and was now flying over it. The song also served as an ode to the actual city in itself. After the hit single, El Paso had long supported Marty Robbins. At a bicentennial tribute to Marty Robbins at the Sun Bowl Stadium in July 1976, El Paso Mayor Don Henderson presented Marty with the Conquistador Award, the highest honor of the city of El Paso. Marty showed he loved the city back by starring in El Paso, City by the Rio Grande, a tourism package video for El Paso. Marty narrated it, spoke about El Paso's history, from the natives to the Spanish to the cowboys to today, then the 1970s, and even sang a few songs in it. The whole orange-tinted promo video, courtesy of El Paso's Visitors and Convention Bureau, made ready use of the songs El Paso and El Paso City in it. El Paso City featured as the main attraction. Though, according to Marty, he always felt the song needed some funky guitar. After El Paso City, Marty often talked about one more El Paso song, but he never got to it. It would have been called The Mystery of El Paso, or sometimes referred to as The Mystery of El Paso City, a sort of sequel or continuation of themes from El Paso City. Marty was often asked about reincarnation after the release of El Paso City, and if he believed he was the cowboy from the song. He said he did not, but admitted reincarnation was a good songwriting tool. The Mystery of El Paso would have been a reflection on the popularity of Marty's El Paso songs, and, as he described it, about the cowboy that rode in and out of El Paso and why people say it was me. The unreleased song's history is confusing, obscure, and often entangled with El Paso City. It seems to have been inspired by the same plane ride. Marty originally described it as being about an airline pilot and his wife, compared in song to the Cowboy and Felina in El Paso, until, while writing it, the song evolved more into a tale about reincarnation. Though, once again, some of the ideas about reincarnation may have been used in El Paso City instead. Marty confirmed in an interview with Bob Allen that he did in fact write The Mystery of El Paso, but never got around to recording it, though it may have also been renamed to El Paso City. It's kind of unclear. Anything about the plot, if about a reincarnated Cowboy and Felina, or an airline pilot and his wife, is unknown. Marty never recorded it though, so nobody will ever know, right? Well, actually, there was never an official recording, but Bill Mack, legendary country DJ, radio host, and longtime friend to Marty Robbins and his career. Marty often appeared on Mack's show for interviews and performances throughout the years. So what does Bill Mack's country radio shows have to do with the mystery of El Paso? Well, Marty would bring on drafts of songs to perform for Bill Mack, friends, and radio listeners. As is obvious, the mystery of El Paso was one of these, and there were, tapes. But Barbara J. Pruitt's reference book on Marty Robbins' career, Marty Robbins, Fast Cars and Country Music, features this blurb for the Marty Party tapes. The 2 tapes contain excerpts from these visits and include both interview segments and music. Of special interest to researchers is the inclusion of Marty's brief performance of some unrecorded material, especially another song about El Paso called The Mystery of El Paso. So that is it then, the tapes do exist. Once again, they do, but the P.O. box and address are defunct, so do not go sending money to them. I reached out to Marty Robbins' biographer Diane Dickman on this. According to her, Bill Mack's health and mental abilities have declined in recent years. She was never able to acquire the tapes. It seems others have, though, years ago, and there are supposedly copies, if only a few dozen, in circulation out there. So yes, there does exist, if only partially, a recording of The Mystery of El Paso somewhere. The song titled The Mystery of El Paso, about a mystery, is in itself a mystery. It is very possible it is simply another version of El Paso City, but another truly unique El Paso song by Marty Robbins cannot be ruled out. It can of course be noted the ideas of El Paso track to Marty Robbins' career and the world around him. The original El Paso song inherited the heartbreak romanticism of Marty Robbins' early hits, the form of a love story paired with the cowboy western substance of gunfighter ballads and trail songs, a concept which San Angelo was another, vaguely successful attempt at. Felina, from El Paso, built upon El Paso's form and story to appeal to Marty's established audience. Give them what they want. A return to El Paso, an expansion of Felina's identity. El Paso City, though, was the most personal of the El Paso Saga songs, a musician's reflection of the world that gave birth to his song, and how that song is reflected in him, or on him. The world has changed, but El Paso still remains. The allure of El Paso will never fade. Romantic, mysterious, some parts revolutionary almost, El Paso is one of Marty Robbins' many musical magnum opuses, the one most synonymous with his name. Even to today, when large cultural swaths of the 50s have been forgotten, El Paso remains in hearts and on the radio. It is hard to sum up something like El Paso. With such a cultural impact, one really cannot. Yet, it seems, the ghosts of the cowboy and Felina will linger in El Paso forever. That is the true mystery of El Paso. From the small West Texas town of El Paso, I'd like to give a thanks to my supporter, the Gelsomini family.